Namaste and welcome to the Vichar Manthan podcast. My name is Sumit Sharma and it is my great honor to be hosting this project. The VM podcast is a project looking to explore earnest ideas. I do want to hear from the audience, so if you're tuning into this and you've heard the last couple of episodes, please do email in. You can get me on podcast@vicharmanthan.org. I'm very excited today to bring my good friend Aditya Ji onto the podcast. Aditya Ji is a LA-based filmmaker who has two feature films out. He's got two feature films currently in the works. He's won awards all over the world, including one at the Cannes Film Festival. Aditya Ji and I met at the World Hindu Congress in 2018 in Chicago, where actually I was hosting a panel that Aditya Ji was sitting on. So we had quite a laugh before, during, and after that process. Aditya Ji, welcome to the podcast.
Namaste, Sumit ji. Such a pleasure to be on board. Thank you for inviting me. I hope this is as much fun as it was meeting you at the World Hindu Congress.
For sure, for sure. And I think I'll be quizzing you on all things to do with film and dharma and, your layer on top of that. So how has it been? Tell me more about, the place that you're in, the position you're in as a filmmaker out in LA. What's that scene like?
The film industry out in LA is extremely welcoming and healthy. No complaints so far. Um, I mostly direct and produce, and like you said, two films have already been out. Two are on the way. And coming from dharmic background, I try to include some of those values or themes that I can in my movies where I can. Until now, I haven't been able to fix on a particular genre, which is, I think, same for every director who's starting out. So one of my feature films was a horror film. It was a psychological thriller rather, and the second one that just came out is more of a experimental art film that's a civilizational commentary on Bharat. And the one that we are filming right now is again a family drama on a beach town, a very American story. So work has been good. I've been going through multiple genres, and I think in this process I'll end up narrowing down on the one I like the most.
That's great to hear. So you're really experimenting with your art, your craft, you haven't really settled on a genre and you're exploring them all. Is that the typical journey a creative would go through, especially in because you don't like you produce and direct, and there's so many different things you do for films, right? What what are some of those hats that you wear?
Predominantly, I would produce and direct. In some cases, I would write. So, for example, one of the feature films, A Nomad River, that just came out, is something I also wrote and then produced and directed.
You wrote, produced, and directed that film. So that's A Nomad River. I haven't seen it yet. It's not available in the UK. When will it be released here?
Yes, unfortunately, it's not because the first distribution deal that I got was for North America. So that was Canada, United States, and Mexico. And right now, I'm exploring distribution deals for Europe, which will include UK and India. I mean, as a director, what I want the most is the film to be out there for the most of the world to watch.
Of
So
course.
hopefully, pretty soon it'll be available for you as well.
Brilliant. And so, actually, even the audience that we have on the podcast is not just from the UK. Surprisingly, it's reached areas far and wide, for which I'm ever grateful. And to be able to spread the work of VM is obviously just a privilege. And so, actually, I bet a lot of our listeners out in America, out in the States, can catch this on Amazon Prime, I think.
Yes, so it's on Amazon Prime, Apple, Google Play, YouTube Movies, and it's on a bunch of cable network too. So AT&T, UVerse, DirecTV, Sling, those. So almost I think 60 to 70% of cable network is covered through the distribution in the US at least, in North America.
That's amazing. So that's a film called A Nomad River, and it's already got a 7-star rating on IMDb. So that puts a tick in my box, and obviously I can't wait to watch that. Tell us a little bit more about some of the other films that you've been a part of. Then there was a foreign film you're doing. I think it was Korean, right? At some point.
Yes, so I have done a Korean feature film, which we just got a distributor on board. So I think it should be next couple of months before it's out. The film is called And the Dream That Mattered, which is the English name. There's a Korean name which I cannot pronounce, but it's a story of an actor, mildly successful actor in midlife crisis. The film is predominantly set in Busan and Seoul, and then parts of it are shot in Los Angeles. It's 90% in Korean. So yeah, that's the Korean film I did.
This is the part I remember, right? It's 90% in Korean. So you, I'm guessing, cannot speak Korean.
I cannot speak Korean yet.
Okay, but yet you directed and produced a film. I mean, talk me through that on set. How did that work?
Yes, so I'll have to take you back a bit. So when I was still doing short films, this is 2015, 16, that time, because LA has a huge Spanish speaking population. So naturally, there are many actors and filmmakers and producers who are, from Latin part of the world. So I was offered a couple of shorts which were either in Spanish or in Portuguese, which I said yes to. That, yeah, I could direct it, because they were providing me with a very strong team that could help me with language, who could be my language consultant on set. And these producers trusted me with my vision in terms of, visuals, and how I understand body language. When I did those couple of shorts, it gave me some confidence. Yeah, yeah, this is doable. So in that same chain of events, I came across an actor who's a South Korean guy, who's done pretty decent work here in the US as well. Back in Korea, he's on some of the Netflix shows. So he asked me if I want to direct his film. And what helped me here, to be honest, was that he was heavily invested in writing the script as well, and then he was acting too. So he really knew what he was doing. So
Nice.
I could offload some of my workload to him, because I knew that even if I'm not getting some of those things, there are some cultural details of the scene, or of the culture there in the country, which
Yeah.
the actor needs to act. So I was sure, even if I don't know it, I know that he would do the right way. So
Mm.
that's how I.
And that's got to be really important without the language to pick up on cultural nuances, variations in tone and pitch that mean different things in another culture and language.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Amazing.
And,
And
and
you were able to translate that through, whatever authority or creativity you brought to that
yes.
team to make it
But
happen.
I'll say this though, that it was much more difficult for Korean than it was for Spanish and Portuguese, because Spanish, Portuguese, first, like they both have the same script, which is the Latin, the Roman alphabet,
Sure.
and the language structure is similar to English.
Sure,
So
sure.
if I read deeply enough, I could still tell what the line is saying. But Korean for me was completely out of my comfort zone.
Amazing. And that film did really well, right? It went on to win, I think, Best Independent Film at Korean Cultural Academy Awards.
Yes, yes. So it's a very old and prestigious award that happens in Korea. So
Wow.
we won at that, and we had our first premiere with Lionsgate Studios here, and now we just got the distribution. So let's see how the film goes from this point on.
Amazing. Amazing. I wish you much success, for someone of Indic nature to, travel to America and start making a name for yourself in that film space. I think it's amazing. It's more people need to venture out and do things like this. And I remember actually when after Chicago we came to LA to spend some time with you.
Yes, yes.
And so we had good fun looking at the film studios and running around Hollywood Hills. So and I think I've already said to you, you gotta whenever you got the red carpet out, there's got to be a ticket, at least one ticket for Vichar Manthan.
Of course, goes without saying. I hope that happens. That comes true.
You said that you had to rely quite heavily on that main actor, or rather, his input helped you in your role. I suppose something like that is quite important for an actor-director relationship. Like, would you say,
Yes.
are there what other types of relationships on that movie set are important?
Speaking visually, the most important would be the director and the cinematographer, who's also called the director of photography. So, the man behind the camera,
Right.
who heads the entire team that's dealing with visuals. So, lights and all of that. It's a huge pyramid that the director of photography leads, and the relationship between him or her and the director is one of the most crucial ones. The better the relationship is, the better the workflow on the set becomes. You can communicate without even like saying things. A gesture would be enough for the cinematographer to know what the director wants. And it's almost called like a marriage. Even in film school we were taught that the DP, which is the director of photography, so DP and the director, it's basically a marriage. And once
Amazing.
you find your DP, it's normally a thing for life. Like, you'll see many directors working with the same person for decades. They wouldn't switch.
Amazing. Amazing. And I think that's quite telling of society in general. If we are able to work together harmoniously, seamlessly, and like you said, understand each other at just a gesture or a glance, how much more flourishing or peaceful would a society be? I wonder. That's something to learn.
That was a very profound metaphor.
But I mean, look, you're a filmmaker, right? So you are the master of painting pictures for people and bringing ideas to life. Is there a thread of thought that you have tried to embed in your film work?
Yes, I have. Yeah, let me put it this way. When I was starting out, and it was, say, my first feature, that I'll try to include the themes and, like you said, the thread of thought that I have into my movies. But the more films I'm doing, I realize that the first step should be to unlearn what I think I know, or the threads of thoughts I have, or ideas, or any narratives I have in my head. Unlearn all those and just become a good storyteller first. And it's funny that with each subsequent film, I realized that, oh, I also don't know this, and the next movie will say, oh, I also don't know that. So in fact, the next film I'm directing, which is after a year and a half because of COVID, everything was closed, and I got a lot of time to edit and introspect. So the next one that I'm filming in December, it's almost like I'm walking on the set with no preconceived notions of any kind, as a storyteller or as someone with some kind of narrative or thoughts in my mind. It's a blank slate. So it is almost like I'm going to film school again, and it's a bit scary. But that's where I am at right now. So I would have given a more longer answer for my thought process, or my personal thoughts into my films maybe 2 years back.
Sure.
It has been unlearned, or at least that's what I'm trying to do.
That's so interesting. Just the just the way you paint that out, like, and I think, look, I'm bringing everything you say to life in my own words, right? That it's like real life. You approach hurdles, situations, challenges, whatever that is in your life, and for you, you know, you will have expectations of the world. And then when those expectations are shattered or that reality does not manifest, you think, what happened? What went wrong? Did I analyze this incorrectly? And I think what you've just said there about I have to unlearn all the narratives I've created in my life, or rather in on the movie set, and put them back together in a new way. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. So you said 2 years ago you would have had a different answer. I'm still interested to hear what that is, though.
I'm assuming I would have had a long answer on what narratives I believe in, or what things I think should be told through movies, and those kind of things. And it's not like I don't believe in them anymore, but I think now I realize, before trying to define something, I should first learn it myself properly. Like, if I am to tell my own thoughts through my stories, becoming a storyteller first is more important than directly jumping onto the thoughts and narratives I believe in. And I think as I become a better storyteller, I also discover more things about my own original narratives that I didn't in the past.
Brilliant. Yeah, for sure. And I guess it's for everyone to derive their own meaning from anyway. And that's something I've always wanted to know about films. So you've obviously got a story about what happens, and sometimes directors will leave like cliffhangers or open-ended things, right? Is that something that you do? Like, by design, do you leave Easter eggs in? Do you leave people to be able to create their own meaning out of things sometimes?
Yes, that is something I definitely love to do. You would see that a lot in this film, Nomad River. It's very, very, experimental, or basically art house cinema kind of thing. And almost every scene has some kind of a subtext or a meaning behind.
No
And again, I
way.
was able to do it because I was producing and writing, so I had more independence. But the psychological thriller, or the film that coming up, you'll have those things, but obviously I have to listen to the producers, I have to listen to the financiers and what the actors want and what would sell. So I have to think in those terms. But in my film, obviously I did it all the way, wherever I could.
I'm definitely interested now to watch this. Someone tuning in that can get me a VPN, please let me know how we're going to make this happen. We need to watch this film. We were talking there about some of the narratives, right? Being someone of Indic nature, living in the Western world, are there some values that you think you'd like to bring to the table or tell through your stories? Like, what's important? What's not being told right now?
In terms of where I come from, like from that lens, I think there's a lot that's not being told about the place and the culture that I come from. There's an immense There's immense wealth of knowledge and philosophies and life lessons and principles and name it, like sciences, that have not been told. So that's something that I would definitely like to include. And when I was saying earlier that 2 years back I would have given a different answer, I meant that all these things that I just mentioned about the place Bharat that I come from, 2 years back I would have called it narratives that I wanted to plant in my films. I mean, correcting myself now, I think that the word narrative is not the right one to use for something like that. For example, Western civilization is essentially based on Greco-Roman culture,
Yeah.
linguistics, politics. All, I mean, the words they use, their daily life, a lot of things are direct descendants of the Greco-Roman uh, pagan culture of the old times.
And you see that in films, right? Like, democracy and the Senate and all these kind of things are built from these times.
Exactly, yes. Like, look, like right from how the Senate looks physically, if in Washington or in London or anywhere else, from the architecture to the paintings to how buildings are made, all of it is a direct descendant of the Greco-Roman.
Even our calendar, this Gregorian calendar.
Yes, a calendar too. So even if the religion switched, like it was pagan, now it's Christian, that didn't change the cultural line that the West still follows. But you'll see, never is it called a narrative, because it is not a narrative. It's a logical truth that they live every day. When they talk about Roman democracy or parliament system, it's a truth they live. It's something that's logical. It doesn't need to be called a narrative. It's not a idea, or it's not something similar to a propaganda that they're trying to plant.
Yeah, it's not just a story, it's just default. It's just the way it is.
Exactly. So you won't call Principia Mathematica by Newton a narrative. It's not a narrative. It's a logical book that was introduced with principles that would stay unchanged. Even if tomorrow, if people are to forget mathematics and we are to switch back to caveman lifestyle, it's not going to make that book false. Principia
Hmm.
Mathematica will be true irrespective, and it will resurface again after many years through some other guy in some other language. But the essential principles of differentiation or integration or all other kinds of mathematics will stay the same. So those things can't be called narrative, and that brings me to the cultural heritage that we have from Bharat. I think those things used to be a part of daily life of people in that part of the world, and
Yeah.
they are so logical and scientific that they can be and should be a part of daily life of people everywhere. And for that reason they're not narrative. We cannot call. So for example, if in my movie I'm to talk about, if me or any other filmmaker is to talk about yoga, or we are to talk about Indian astronomy, Indian classical music, architecture. Okay, architecture I can leave out because it's more about art. It's different for every region. But yoga and astronomy and calendar, and medical sciences, from ancient India, those things, if I show in my films, I shouldn't be calling them that I am showing some kind of Indic narrative, because it's
Hmm.
not. I'm showing something that's logical, at par with Principia Mathematica, or at par with Magna Carta or Roman democracy.
That's so interesting. I guess what you're saying there is you're not trying to sell the Indic civilization or the sciences that come from it. Like it's not propaganda. You're saying it's as important on par with things like the Magna Carta. It is a way of life, the Sanatan Dharma that's been around for whatever thousands, 10,000s of years. And you touched on some of those things like philosophy I've talked about this before on Vijay, like educational systems, political sciences, the entire yogic spectrum, right? And not just breathing and stretching like in the West, like the deep philosophies of the Yoga Sutras are a way of life
Yes,
and are there for the flourishing of society. It's not like it's an individual goal to have. There's something for everyone.
exactly, exactly. It's and you use the right word, that we are not trying to sell anything. It's not setting up shop and giving a narrative from left wing or right wing and this wing and that ism. It's not that. Those things also exist. Like there are part in Hindu or Bharatiya culture that can qualify as some kind of an ism. It's fine. And
Sure, sure.
architecture, for example, if I go tomorrow that the this Senate building in US should be shaped like a temple, now okay, that would be a narrative. If someone likes it, they're free to adapt it. But if, as long as it's about yoga or something much more deeper and closer to the core, I think it's logic. It's not narrative.
And I think when we were talking about this some time before about Gregorian systems per se are quite fixed, whereas if you look at Sanatan Dharma, things follow nature. like sun cycles, moon cycles. Diwali is not on the same day every year. It shifts around, as do the rest of things. Um, but to the naked eye, that would seem illogical.
Exactly. And when it seems illogical, and then we try to talk it up, it seems like we're trying to sell something. It seems like we're
Mm,
trying to propagate some kind of narrative. But then what should be done is, instead of trying to sell a calendar from our land, from Bharat, it should be it should be propagated, like, it's a wrong use of word, but it should be told in a logical way. Because, like, Gregorian is a solar calendar, the Hindu calendar is a lunar solar calendar. So what it does is, each month is synced with each amavasya in the north, or purnima in the south. Like, it depends, like, where the start of the month is, on where you are in India, because I think South Indians
yeah.
go a different way. But essentially they still go by the moon cycle. So each 28-day amavasya to amavasya cycle will be the switch of a month. And then, depending on where this which constellation the sun is in, that would become the name of the month. So after 28 days, the sun will shift to the next one, we'll switch the month. Like, the Gregorian calendar has a leap year after every 4 years, because there's a
Yeah,
delay.
We're constantly playing catch up.
Yes, so you're playing catch up. We have the same one for our calendar too. In our case, it's a leap month in a way. So, like, these guys, they'll add one extra day after every 4 years. We'll add one extra month after every 3 years. It's the same lag.
interesting.
Wow.
Now, that, I mean, it's open to debate. The good thing with logic is that, there can be some philosopher from Rome who might be like, what, this calendar is not good. Solar is better. Okay, it's fine. We can argue back.
And with all these concepts, they are tried and tested methods, and they are up for scrutiny.
Up for scrutiny, and then both the calendars have their own thing. Like, it's not like any calendar is superior info. They're both ideas based on logic and mathematics. Because the debate between the solar and the lunar solar calendar is not which one is right or wrong, it's which one is more convenient for what kind of lifestyle. That's more of
Very,
it.
very good point.
So
Very
lunar
good point.
solar is more synced with yoga, it's more synced with everyday life of everybody. Like, it's synced with a bunch of things that constitute our day and our year and each month. So, you'll see in India, every festival is synced to this calendar. Every day has
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
structured in a way that the society already has a time code that has been given to them for each year. There are benefits to that. Obviously, there are benefits to having just the solar calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar from Rome, which has its own upside. So when we talk about the Hindu calendar, this is how it should be talked about, that this is based on the solar and lunar cycle. And if someone learns this calendar, you'll end up learning the sky so well. Even if you just learn this calendar, you can look up in the sky and tell what day it is, where the moon is, what phase, which constellation, all of it. So
I
mathematically, your
suppose
brain
that's a
becomes synced with how the sky is functioning.
Yeah, in tune with nature. I suppose that has some benefits. But Aditya, tell me, why is this important to you, and how does this link in with the cinema world, or filmmaking? Like, surely Bollywood would have all of this stuff as default as well. Filmmaking in the West has thing like Gregorian, Greco-Roman ideology baked in as default. And I think the argument we're making here is that there should be more of a logical representation, or more of a representation of the sciences and civilizational heritage from Sanatan Dharma. My question is, Bollywood coming from India surely has some of those things baked into it by default. Like, I'm not as up to date with Bollywood as maybe I once used to be. Is that not the case?
This would be it's a tricky answer. So, my career has mostly been in LA. So I'll give a disclaimer that I can't claim to know um, that how much Bollywood is in connection with all this. But from what I've seen, I don't think when Sanatan Dharma is represented, it's shown as a logical entity. Even if the filmmaker or the writers are pro Sanatan Dharma, or pro Hindu, whatever, they
Yeah, religion is shown as quite fluffy. It's quite
yeah,
a
it's shown as religion, exactly.
esoteric, sort of loose.
And I mean, these Vedic rishis who wrote the Suktas and Rigvedas, who wrote the Upanishads, if they were to see their own work shown as religion, probably they wouldn't like it. They would be the first people to not approve of putting it this way, because all our texts, all our scriptures are always about a question. It always ends on what we don't know, how much we need to discover. There should be a debate. Like, that's how it is. So when this culture is portrayed with a certain color, with very ritualistic, very superstitious, I don't think it's the best face to be put forward. Obviously, it should be there. I'm not saying no to it, but logic should precede everything else.
That is so powerful what you've just said. And if I can try to paraphrase that, if the rishis and the sages and the teachers that wrote some of these holy books thousands of years ago saw the way it is being manifested today as a religion, they would disapprove, because you're saying it's not a religion. These are open texts designed to ask you questions so that you can introspect further and gain the answers or gain more clarity for yourself through a lived experience rather than a prescriptive set of whatever rules, if for example.
Yes, and don't get me wrong in this, that I'm against what's being shown.
Sure.
As humans, I think physiologically, like right from being a single cell to a multicellular complex organism with complex nervous systems, I think defense mechanism is one of the most important things we have within ourselves. So like the first cell had its cell wall. So we are structured to think in terms of what's me and what's not me.
Quite binary.
Yeah, and that creates a wall around us which helps us survive. So we are programmed to think like that. So when this same effect from a single cell, when the same effect is scaled to the nervous system, and it comes to thoughts and emotions and philosophies, which are now subtler, which are not physical, that even there we seek to have definitions, we seek to have boundaries. We are not very comfortable with having things open and undefined. So we definitely, the entire species, we always need definitions and symbols and rituals. We need that. So even Sanatan Dharma has its symbols and rituals and definitions and boundaries. All fine, that needs to be there. But those boundaries were put in place so that within those boundaries we would do logic and science.
Sure.
So while those boundaries are being propagated, that needs to be the internal logic. That's the essence of all this should also be highlighted, I think.
Man is constantly on the search for meaning. Very interesting. Okay, so let's talk more about how you have carried some of this through into some of your film work. Have you got an example of where these things have been brought into some of your film work?
Yes, I have. I'll give two. So one was from a documentary I did some time back, which is it was a very direct reference to all this. It was a documentary. I think you must have seen it. It's called Eastern Shores of the Western World. I filmed it in Eastern Europe and to show the similarities between pre-Christian pagan cultures and Vedic systems. And the similarity, though on the surface it looks like it's a similarity of rituals, similarity of having similar gods and those kind of things. But my idea was that it's not the similarity of these things. Gods in pagan culture and Vedic culture mean something deeper. It doesn't mean, so the film is not about, oh, you pray to the same god I do. No, that's not the idea.
Right.
We both had similar concepts which got corrupted in a way that only the ritualistic meanings were left. Everything else went away. So that was one example, but it was a direct documentary. The second would be this film Nomad River, which you haven't seen yet. By the way, before you find the VPN, I'll try to get a distribution deal for UK, so you don't have to do that. But in the Nomad River, one of the storylines we follow is of a classical singer, uh, music teacher from Jaipur, who's pretty well known otherwise as well. He's called Pandit Krishna Mohan Bhatt. He's a sitar teacher, and the other character is a girl an actress from US who has gone to him to study classical music, and that's the storyline. But in that storyline, separate from this, is a scene where it is implied that when your physiological state is at its most stable, your breathing is in sync with the Earth's rotation. So the number of breaths you take can be synced up with how many arc minutes the Earth has rotated.
Fascinating.
So that's the idea, and then they do a calculation of, okay, then that means that the sun is 30 arc minutes big in the sky. It's half a degree, so that's 30 arc minutes. So how many? So it will take exactly 30 breaths for sun to rise completely. So from the time it touches the tip comes out of the horizon, 30 breaths will be exactly 30 arc minutes. Sun will be completely out. Now, putting this scene in, had nowhere in the scene do we mention Indian classical music, Hindu dharma, Hinduisms, none of that. But the scene is there, and it's straight away speaking about what Indian classical music is bringing to the table. So that's one way that I try to do it. And obviously this was filmed 3 years back. So like I told you, in the last 3 years I've changed much more. So when I do it in later films, I'll strive to do the same, but with even more finesse. And but these are the ideas that I would put forward. The link of yoga and astronomy is something that came from my land. That's what I would like to tell.
And the way you described that was so subtle as well, and that's amazing. To be in tune with the nature that much that you can. I mean, I've never had to measure an arc minute before, but that's I'll have to bake that away on my to-do list to figure out at some point. But amazing, like amazing. I love to hear it. And I watched the trailer. There was a few shots of Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev, Sadhguruji's Rally for Rivers project. Was obviously underpinning some of the thought patterns going on here.
So the story of the movie is essentially it's two girls on a parallel story. So one is an actress who's in Jaipur learning classical music. The second girl is Adriana from Colombia. She's actually a volunteer for ICCS and Seva. So there's a deep Seva ICCS connection the movie has, and she's an actress in the movie. And though Adriana doesn't come from an acting background, she does social work a lot. You know, she has traveled with native communities across the world, and I I got her on board, and we decided she doesn't need to act; she just needs to do what she does. And
Wow.
I, as the filmmaker, will make sure that it ends up looking like a story. So the idea was that because Rally for Rivers was happening in India when we were filming, so we made a semi-fictional narrative around her that she's from Venezuela instead of Colombia, and because of the financial collapse in the country in 2017, she cannot go back, and she's stuck in India. So to keep staying in India because she can't return back home, she joins the Rally for Rivers as a volunteer, and with that she travels across India. So it becomes her perspective of looking at India as a civilization, while in her head she's comparing it to what she saw in Venezuela. The things
Sure.
that she saw went wrong in Venezuela, and she's like, oh, I see some of those things here, and is this civilization at a risk too? So it becomes a introspective story of, is India as a culture doing enough for the people that are deprived? Are we paying attention to the people we should be paying attention to? That becomes Adriana's perspective, while she's traveling with the rally, where we see this entirely different group of motivated, optimistic people who are trying to make sure that the rivers of the country are revived again. So she's split between these two perspectives, like, okay, all the big stuff is good, but is that going right? Because she's coming from a backdrop of Venezuela where she saw it go wrong terribly. So that's so
Amazing.
that's how I included Rally for Rivers and classical music in one single universe.
That's crazy. That's the way you're able to layer up so many different ideas and thoughts. I guess that is part of your craft. And something you just said there, that the actress she's not a professional actress, but she's involved in such deep projects. And what did you say? You said she should just do what she does, and your responsibility as a filmmaker is to capture those moments. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. Again, I'm gonna pick this from this podcast. Is in you do your dharma, you do what's right by you, you fulfill your duty, and the rest of the components will line up as and when and how they need to. So whatever role you play in life, in society, or if you're starring in Aditya Ji's next blockbuster movie, then you do your bit, and everyone else will do their bit in their own right.
Wow, that's really profound, Sumiji. Like, you do your dharma. Well, it's something I'm going to use in my next interview when that happens.
I mean, just put the credit, just put my name in the credits. We don't have to say anymore.
Oh, I can't claim that it's my line.
Ah, dear. We're gonna start fighting for creative content here, but all in the name of Dharma, right? We're all here to spread that good work. Ditiji. So I guess on set things must come out of the blue. Things might go wrong. I guess when you're on set, there's a lot happening. There's the cinematographers, there's everyone on stage. Like I don't even know all the roles, but a whole bunch of activity happens. I guess sometimes things also take a funny turn, or things happen unexpectedly.
Yes, they do. In fact, every day. But in your question, like, so unexpectedly good or bad, which one?
I guess what perspective you want to look at it from. But the reason I said that is because we're going to do the rapid fire round now, just to throw you a curveball.
I see. So I'm good with unexpected stuff on set. Like, that's one of the strengths that I know I have. The other ones are now into question. Like I told you, I started doubting everything I do. Like, do I know it? Do I? But like, this is one thing which I'm okay on set with. If things go wrong, I'm usually very calm, and I'm like, you know what? We'll handle it. Let's just move on. We'll find a way. We'll
Sure.
make it work. But I hope that applies to your rapid fire.
Let's see on the VM podcast how you do with the rapid fire round.
And if I'm too slow
So
with the
Aditya,
answers, you can edit them to.
like I said in the beginning, the less editing time, the better, please. I'm sure, and I'm speaking to a film director here. I'm sure you know all about the editing and the long hours, stuff like that might take. And you're gonna have a keen eye too, right?
I guess so. Yeah, I hope so.
Aditya ji, what goes into your perfect breakfast smoothie?
I missed so perfect breakfast movie.
Yeah, go on, tell us that. What's your perfect breakfast movie?
Perfect breakfast movie would be something comedy. I'll usually watch The Office, the US version. That's my
Okay,
go-to for a perfect breakfast. Media entertainment.
sure. And so the original question I'll ask now is your perfect breakfast smoothie.
Oh, so usually milk, banana, a little bit of protein powder, and any fruit that I have. If it's strawberries or anything else that Mansi has graciously got home, because I'm
Sure.
usually bad with buying that stuff. So banana milk and anything else I find.
Brilliant. Okay. If you were stranded on a desert island and you could only take three items with you, what would you take and why?
I'll take a bag which has multiple. So I'll take a bag of tools. I think which will help me survive there. And that bag can have multiple stuff. So is that okay? Is that cheating? If I
That is
count
so cheeky. I don't know. No, I'm not going to accept this
a
one.
bag that has a tarp that has some fabric, some wood, some bunch of screwdrivers and stuff like that. Does that count?
All right. Okay. That's one item. I'll let you have that.
Okay.
But the second two items need to be individual items.
Okay. Second thing, I would love to take a telescope or a binocular that can help me see far. That would be the second item, and it far counts both if it's on the land or up looking in the sky. And the third thing would be a book, which would be some kind of a science fiction book. I can't name the exact one because I need to name something I haven't read yet, but
Sure.
would definitely be some book, which is something
Brilliant.
high fiction, high fantasy science fiction, which would be amazing to read.
Interesting. Interesting answers. What's the best piece of advice anyone has ever given you?
It's something that I remember from my father, which was that any other person apart from yourself that you're dealing with, and then that extends to the way you behave, is coming from a long list of cause and effect chain. So that doesn't mean you have to act keeping that in mind, but still keep that in mind that it's a cause and effect chain, and it's not the person, it's the situation always. So that in fact helps me a lot on set and with dealing with crews or situations, that it's a situation, it's not a person, it's not the man, it's the chain of events where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So sometimes understanding that might not change my action, but it still affects it in some way, in a deeper way.
That's quite deep. I like that. The whole universe has conspired for this moment to happen. Um,
Actually, I would love to because when I talk to my father, this line comes often, and it always ends with that you are here to watch. So if things get way worse, always think you're here to watch. This profound system has opened up in front of you. What's the worst that can happen?
yeah, I love it. That's so good. And I guess being a film director too, as well, right? Being, you're behind the camera, be the observer.
I never made that connection, but thank you. Another thing I'm stealing that you said today.
I'm telling you, Aditya ji, you gotta sign me up to one of your teams, man. LA, we can make this work. If you had, I don't know, unlimited budget and authority, who would be your perfect cast, dead or alive?
Dead or alive? Okay. Can I name a couple of people?
Yeah, yeah, a cast. Let's say five people. Your dream five dream cast. What would it be?
So it would be Timothy Chalamet, Al Pacino, Kate Blanchett, Robert De Niro, and Brad Pitt.
Okay, wow. And do you think you've got the capacity to handle these five on set? That would be a
I think by the time if I do by the time end up making that much money to produce that, I think I'll have gained the capacity as well.
sure.
Not today for sure.
And that's quite a humble way you've just said that, right? The experience you would have to go through to get to that stature, you would then be, able to. I guess that comes down to capacity, right? Your skills and your character along the way, and thus we are not. What am I trying to say? It is the journey that defines us, not the goal that we're trying to reach. It's what happens along the way, the decisions we make, the consequences thereof is the sum total of our life experience. And I think people forget that, right? We're always chasing something, like chasing the next thing. Do you feel like that with your films sometimes? Like, are you waiting for the end of this production so that it goes live, or is it a constant iterative process?
It's a so recently the chasing, actually since I've started doing films last 6 years that I've actively been doing films, the chasing part has not happened much. It has usually been projects coming my way and me jumping onto it. And I think that's also because of where I am as a director. I think I should direct everything and anything to get as much experience as I can. So I at least as of now I haven't been into chasing. It's always been what comes my way and what's the best I can do. Though there is some upside to chasing, which is the question that you asked earlier, that if I'm in a position where I can choose my actors and choose my story, so at that point it would be something like chasing. I would love to do it at least once in life.
Sure. If we were to make a film based on your life, who would play the lead role?
Oscar Isaac.
Okay, why?
Couple of people told me he looks like me, and I like the actor. I like the
Okay.
actor, how he he's a short guy, not physically imposing, but somehow when he walks on, and depending on what role he's playing is exactly that. So he could be the Apocalypse from X-Men, or he could be a husband from the marriage movie that just came out with Jessica Chastain. He does justice to them. And then obviously someone told me he has a nose like me. So
Perfect. Can you describe for me a moment in your life where your paradigm shifted? Is there a moment that defines you, or a series of events that just flicked a light bulb inside somewhere?
yes, I can think of two, which were like they were almost like U-turns in a way. So one was when I started my band in when I was in doing my bachelor's in India.
God, this guy is multi-talented, huh? Band, producer, editor, director of everything.
To be honest, music is still the first thing I do. So when I was little, I used to say I would become a music director when I grow up. So that used to be my thing. And then after a point, I realized that it's actually storytelling that I like. Music is just something I know how to do, but I'm not that great of a composer or anything. But I do know the hang of it.
So music before movies, eh?
Music before movies. So and to be precise, percussions. I started with tabla and drums when I was 10 years old. Six from between the age of 6 to 10, I picked up tabla, which is an Indian instrument, and then I moved on to drums because it's much cooler. And no one looks in the school. If you play a tabla and then you play a drum, who's people gonna look at more. And by people, I mean girls.
Oh dear, oh dear.
But yeah, I did that. Then I picked up guitar and piano on the side. Again, not as an expert, something I knew how to do. And what I noticed first in arts used to be like when I was watching any film, I should notice the background score the most with how the visuals are working with it. And that gave me the sense that I want to become a music director. But later I realized it's not exactly music, it's just the combination that I fall in love with every time. That how the visual is working with what kind of score. So I started thinking in my head that I would become a director someday, but there was no defined path. But in my college, when a bunch of my seniors approached me to be the drummer on their band, it was a heavy metal thrash metal band. So we were covering Metallica and Megadeth and these bands in India, and I was a drummer on it. So that was a switch in how I used to think, because I inherently used to be a shy person, to myself. I know by my face I don't look like a person who would play thrash metal. All our competition.
You definitely don't, and even after having met you, I would not have you come across as a Metallica fan or anything like that. So one day we'll have to see you on stage, and you know what? This time, Aditya ji, your challenge: make the tabla look cool.
I will, and I've done it once. So that's what I was saying. The switch happened, which was when I used to play simple rock kind of drumming, and then my bandmates they said that we'll be covering Megadeth next, and I was like, okay, what is Megadeth? And they showed me a few songs. It was all growling and distortion guitar and all that. I was like, is this music? What is this? And I was judgmental, not my type and stuff. But I mean, obviously, it was a band. I couldn't say no. It was a good opportunity I was getting. I was like, you know what, I'll learn drumming. And then when I started learning it, I realized that it was so complex, so profound. The drumming and the guitaring on these metal songs, they sound that way if because you're not used to that music. But what goes behind creating them was extra. It taught me drumming as an entirely new thing. And then as I started performing on stage, I started asking my bandmates, hey, you know what? Can I introduce the band before or after? Because, as a drummer, I'm always sitting at the back. You guys are on the front singing or doing the guitar and head banging and stuff. Can I go up front uh, and introduce? And when I started doing that, it gave me an experience of how it feels to speak on stage. So
Wow.
that one year, which is I think 2009, was a turn for me where I was exposed to crowds and response and putting your music out or being not being shy with what you create. So that was one life changing, or what your question was. It was one of those.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a very wholesome, humbling story. You've got to put yourself out there, step out of your comfort zone, get on stage, speak to people, spread the light that shines from within you. Is what I take away from that.
Something like that, yeah. Like I used to, because I and with my because of my bandmates, I used to be after our drums. I mean, our band jammings and practices. I used to ask them to teach me guitar, and they used to, they were very happy to teach me basic things. So from that point, I used to be like, you know what, when we do the sound check, which takes half an hour before the performance, can I do the sound check on the guitar? Can I be out front? Because I know later on I'm going to sit back there. And again, see, drum is a very the instrument drum is close to how I am personally. I am shy, and drum helps with that because it creates a wall. So I never feel shy while drumming because there's no direct connection. I'm
Yeah,
still sitting behind a wall doing my own thing, looking down. But I used to venture out, so that was one of the, like, life turning kind of things, which is still helpful even on set today, where I have to push through barriers and make sure my voice is heard across people. And the second was the COVID lockdown, the last year and a half, when I was predominantly editing a Nomad River, and there was no other thing to direct. And I mainly spent my time introspecting the work that I had done, what I liked in it, what I did not like in it, what I could have done differently. Which suddenly, especially in 2020 and first half of 21, it opened my mind to this idea that, what, I don't know things. I don't know. Maybe I don't know storytelling. Maybe I don't know editing. Maybe I don't know direction. And that just opened up my mind to, what, I'll be open to receiving things that I can learn from everybody else on a set. I shouldn't be on this position of, oh, I'm a director, I have to behave a certain way, and I already know this, I already have my opinions, I already have my narratives. All that went away, which I'm very grateful for. So yeah, these were the two.
that's so great. And a moment like that must come with so much humility, also, to actually accept that, hey, I know nothing, and this is something I proclaim a little bit. I know nothing, right? I'm constantly learning about the world and people and how we function together as a society, and the little things that make us tick. We are quite unique creatures. I guess approach everything like a beginner.
Actually, like the line, I really, third line that I'm stealing, approach everything like a beginner. That's, I think that's what you just said, that uh, I'm not claiming that I still understand that line completely or I still can adapt it completely, but I think that's how every creative form, everything should be done.
And that's the beauty of it, right? We don't have to define everything. It's an ongoing lived experience.
And it's so funny, this idea that we are talking of right now, isn't that the core of what dharmic philosophy is?
I suppose. Like,
It's always introspective and questioning, always. It'll always end up with the last line being that the rishi tells the student that, I don't know. Why don't you go and find out? Maybe you don't know. Rigveda, so many points you'll find them say that, the shishya, the student will ask, will the gods know the answers? And the rishi will say, even the gods won't know because they came after. So, like, isn't what we're talking very close to what Sanatana Dharma is, that you will be exploring always.
quite deep. I love it. I don't know when the rapid fire round ended. This has happened to me before, but let's just say we're ending it here, Ditaji. Well done. You've made it through.
So this was also the rapid fire, the last couple of questions.
I guess so. I don't know.
That was like a slow
let's
burn.
see what let's see what post let's see what post production does with this. Don't know what's going to happen next. So, Aditya, you've been directing, producing feature films, short films, documentary, television. You know, your whole world is to do with audio, visual, creative arts. Is there some advice you could give someone who would want to break into this scene, who thinks that the movie direction scene is something that they want to do or they have a calling in? What tips could you give a young grad?
The most important thing would be to just step out and start filming. And it's so easy nowadays with such amazing phones that can do videos. Like, the current iPhone can pretty much match up what a good camera does. So even in my movie, there are three shots which are done on iPhone. I won't tell you which ones.
Okay, I'm gonna go figure them out.
Yeah, you'll have to figure them out because we were in a location where I realized it was too crowded. I couldn't take the big camera out; people would look, but it looked beautiful. I shot it on a 4K iPhone and put it in there. So I mean, point being that it's very easy to film nowadays, to edit at home on any basic software. So any advice for anyone who wants to go into visual storytelling would be just step out and start making things. And a good way to start is usually again, I can only give my own examples because I know only this one path, which is mine. So when I was starting out, I knew a bunch of bands because of my exposure to band culture in my hometown. So I approached those bands and asked them, you know what, I can do a music video for you for free if you can let me use your song. So it was like a deal where they were getting a video for free and I was getting a song to make something on. So I
Sure.
started making music videos for these guys. So that was a good starting point where I was not wasting my week. I used to do it on the weekend, so that way if I'm doing something else to make my livelihood, that wasn't affected. And on the weekends I have to get these videos out. At one point I realized, why don't I add some story to the music video instead of just showing the band playing? What if this guy is walking down the street or something like that? And that gave me some hold on how to tell something narrative, how to tell a story. So that was one way that worked. Obviously there are many, but I think anyone starting out should be this: like, they can pick up a camera, take something very small, simple concept that they like, and tell the story in 5 minutes. It can be a narration, voiceover, or it can be a dialogue scene.
Brilliant. I'll have to get you in touch with the Varney Speakers Academy. So there's a public speaking academy here we've got in the UK who's training up selfless workers to tell their story, to step out of their comfort zone. So some of what you said there would be very very powerful for some of those guys, and actually for anyone listening, right? If there's something you want to do in your life, even if it's not to be a filmmaker, step out of your comfort zone and just start
Yes.
somewhere and you'll figure it out. So as we've been talking about the various hats that you wear, right? You've directed films, you've produced films, you've done screenwriting, you've done editing, you understand how the camera works. Wearing multiple hats, does that take you away from like being focused on one thing at a time? Or is there something about having multiple angles, multiple views on a topic that make it more wholesome for you?
It is actually it's both the things that you just said. So having multiple hats helps because you feel more in control of the story or the project that you're doing. But definitely being focused on one, it makes that one thing way more profound than it's in the other case. So for example, in the Nomad River, where I was doing most of the main, so writing, producing, directing, all of it, while directing, half the time I used to be concerned with some logistic issues from the next day, or what's going to happen next week when we get there, because our car, the tire is not okay, or the camera is not available in that city, stuff like that. Whereas in the movie that's coming up next time that I'm doing, like, we already filmed something until yesterday, and then the next schedule is supposed to be in December. uh, I'm just the director, so I'm much more focused just on visuals, just on the storytelling aspect of it. So, for example, I know the scene of two people talking in a bar, and I didn't write it. The scriptwriter just gave it to me. So, because I did not write it, I'm not coming in with any preconceived perspective on that scene. I'm almost reading it like my audience would later on. Uh, so I'm much more fresh in giving inputs about it. I can see things in it which the writer can't. I can point out problems in it. I can add something new to it which the writers didn't see. So definitely, out of all these, just doing direction would be the ideal case for me.
That's interesting, isn't it? Be the customer, be your audience. um, I work in IT, right? We in the cloud computing space, and I'm always thinking about what is it that the customer sees. What is it when they log into that portal or they click on that app, or even if I'm downloading an app or trying something new for the first time, I'm thinking, what is my simplest, easiest journey? What's my user path? Can I quickly get out of this menu? Or I guess in your instance, you're talking about in the film and direction space, what is that simple idea, or what is it that my audience pick up or learn on? And so I do some work in the public speaking space, and I'm constantly analyzing people's body language, their eyes, which way are they looking, why do they keep tapping their feet, or they keep making that weird noise. So it's a constant I don't know, I feel like I'm judging people though. I guess that's your role. You, as a director, are you judging?
Yes, yes, it has to be that. And actually, you touched on on one of the most important aspects of all of it. I missed mentioning it earlier, so thank you for bringing it up. That when you said, for you, in IT, and for me, like, what's your customer seeing? In my case, what's the audience seeing? That's the most profound and the most difficult question in my field, for example, in direction. What the audience is saying, because the answer is not easy at all. Because the thing is, the audience is not watching the shot, it's watching the shot before it, and the shot after.
Yeah.
And their brain is stitching that up and filling up the gap in the middle with a story of their own. So, as much as I have to tell a story, I also have to just nudge them and not tell a story, you know? So, and that becomes extremely difficult. Like, obviously, I mean, I'll tell you this example, which is taught a lot in film school. Everybody knows it. I have known it for 7 years. I still can't do it. Which is, if I see two of us are talking, this Zoom call, maybe if you're recording this Zoom call and that's our movie, it's two guys in two boxes in a Zoom call. So I'm talking about something, and then you're shaking your head listening, and suddenly we open up a third window, which is again a camera in your room, and we point to the statue of Gautam Buddha on the table. We show a close up, then we cut back to your face. Now there's a meaning to the scene which people can interpret in their own ways. Or if I show you while talking to me, you look up, then I show a shot of the window and then cut back to you, it would mean that, oh, looks like Sumitji's bored, or he wants to move on. And these are the meanings that I created. I literally didn't say anything as a storyteller in doing this. I literally just put a shot in there and let the people do their work. So it was done without dialogue, it was done without anything specific. Now this is a basic example that's taught in schools all the time, but this one thing has been the most difficult for me. I'm still learning, and I'll probably keep learning for years to come, which is how to understand what the audience is seeing, because they'll be seeing something that I didn't probably say. So I think that a director whose skills get sharp is getting this skill sharp of, how do I realize what are the things that I didn't say and they understood. So what if I get a
Wow.
control of those things? Then the film would start looking good, because now I'm controlling things that I'm not even having to say.
That is fascinating. I feel manipulated. I'm thinking back now to all the amazing films I've watched, and what are those subtleties that I have picked up and processed and made of my own?
It's most of it like that. It's a very good
Sure.
example is if you're into comic books. The comic books are static, but your brain makes them dynamic, because you're almost analyzing three different boxes of picture, and in your head you're creating a video out of it, like you're creating an audio visual experience without even having that on the paper.
This is fascinating. This is great.
It's one of the most difficult things to do. I mean, when we say like Steven Spielberg is Steven Spielberg, it's probably for this reason, that any movie you watch of his, any genre, like, look at the first 5 minutes and you're into it, because I think that person has a hold of this, not of what to say, but what he cannot say and yet convey or nudge the audience to observe.
Brilliant. And I would be an absolute amiss if I didn't ask you this question. What's your favorite film?
It changes over a while. Can I name a couple, like,
Sure. Okay. Top three, top five.
okay, top five. So there was a film called The Man from Earth, if you've seen it. It's a very low budget indie movie, hardly popular, completely set in one room, where one guy claims that he is 14,000 years old, and he's a professor at a university, and it's his day of leaving the university and moving on to another city. So all his other professors have come to his place for a final goodbye, and he starts implying that probably hasn't died in the last 14,000 years. And I'm not spoiling the movie, because this happens in the first
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Okay.
And the conversation that follows from this point on. Then there is the Lord of the Rings. I wouldn't count it as
Sure.
three movies. I think it's 1 10-hour movie.
Sure. Sure.
It's a it's beyond filmmaking. Nothing has come before like that. Nothing has happened since then.
It's an absolute epic. I do agree.
I don't know what they were doing and how they managed to do what they did. And the storyline and why I like it, like another like reason, deeper reason, that it's just the film reason. So I've read the books, but I'm just talking about the film here. That the story is extremely simple. All the characters are very simple, like right from Gollum to Frodo to Sauron himself. Goals, motives, the politics is all very simple. One kingdom
Mm,
fighting against the other kingdom. It's almost like fairy tales you tell kids. There was a king, there was a queen, there was a. It's that kind of a simple storyline, minimalistic, and yet it's one of the best ones ever done. So I think that Lord of the Rings for me.
excellent.
Third would be The Godfather. Again, I'm
Okay.
counting as one movie, all three of them. People differ on which one they like the most, but I've never seen a movie dive in so deep into someone's personal life as Godfather does. It it takes you inside Vito Corleone or Michael Corleone's life as a husband, as a father, as a son.
As the multiple hats he has to wear.
Multiple hats he has to wear. You feel you can relate to almost all of it. It's fascinating the way that movie is structured. Uh, to portray someone in the mafia like this without anything cheesy or none of that. There's no show happening. It's very subtle and grounded. So third would be The Godfather. Fourth would be it used to be the fourth. It's not anymore, but I would still like to mention is The Matrix.
For sure. And that's my favorite.
So if that's your favorite, there's a dharmic connection there.
Oh, yeah. I think cinema is littered with Hindu literature, like Avatar and The Matrix, all over the place.
So with Matrix, there's a direct reference, which is the last movie, Revolutions. So the end of Revolutions, the ending credits of the movie, once
Yeah.
the film is done, it's a 9-minute long ending credit session. It takes 9 minutes to finish because it's a credit session for all three movies, so it takes a really long time. The background score that plays there, the soundtrack is called Navras. It starts with Asatoma Sadgamaya chant. Then it jumps into a South Indian chant, which I still can't understand the meaning of, and I've been Googling and no one knows. And then it jumps into completely Indian classical music. Like it starts from high octane, synth wave. Then it goes into Indian classical with flute and matki and all those things. And then you have at the middle you have chants going up. Narayanaya vidmahe Vasudevaya dhimahit tanno Vishnu prachodayat. Then they'll jump into Om Adityaya Namah and they'll end again on Asatoma Sadgamaya. And the final shlok where the Warner Brother logo comes in is again something about liberation from the five elements. Now, like going back to the very earlier things we were talking about, this is how you plant it. Because it is not a plant, it's something that the filmmaker believed in. He didn't care if it was from any civilization in the world. It's just something he thought represented his movie good. So he put it in. So he was not selling a narrative, he was selling logic. He was selling that. Even the final fight between Neo and Agent Smith has Asatoma Sadgama playing in the background.
Yes, I do remember
Constantly
that.
on a chant.
I remember watching it in the cinema, thinking, "What's going on? Why are there mantras playing in Matrix?" But obviously, I was a young, naive mind then, and I'm still young and naive, but ever learning.
So Matrix was Matrix was the fourth because of that. And the fifth would be any one of the movies from Christopher Nolan. I don't want to name any. They're masterpieces, all of them. They are the scale, the visual scale of things is. I don't know how he does it. Like when he has to show a black hole, it's no one has shown it that way. When he has to show waves, no one else has done it that way. In the next movie he's making on Robert Oppenheimer, I can only imagine how a nuclear bomb explosion would look when Christopher Nolan would show it. So, that man's visual sense is something too profound, and that would be the fifth slot. Any of his.
Excellent, brilliant. Thank you very much for that Aditya G. I think, as you said, your top five list is ever evolving, so we'll have to touch base at some point in the future and figure out what they are. I've got one last question for you, actually, before we start to wrap up. Maybe I've got a few more, but this question I have. Okay, so I think we're nearing towards the end of this podcast. I've certainly had a lot of fun, but I've got a few more questions before we finish off. It has been argued that the creative arts are massive influencers in society. Like you can create a film or a TV series, music, anything these days can have a really profound effect on the way society and civilization thinks about things. What responsibility do you think directors of films have when it comes to portraying such concepts? Whether it's a dharmic concept or a value based society, like what responsibility does a director have to produce something that's, I don't know, authentic or has integrity or is telling the truth?
Like a storyteller should have thorough knowledge of what they're talking about. So when it comes to Sanatan Dharma, one needs to know the calendar before. The calendar is a prerequisite for Sanatan Dharma, not only as a filmmaker, in any genre, because it's so ingrained into everything all the rituals and festivals are. So I think a storyteller, whichever value or anything that you are telling, having a deep knowledge of what it is would, it's I think at most important. And the movie Matrix is an example. So I don't think they used the song, they used the chants from Sanatan Dharmic scriptures just because, or just because they wanted to. They had knowledge of it. They knew it suits their movie. They knew that Sanatan Dharma largely considers the world to be Maya, and they knew that's what the movie Matrix is doing, that the world people believe in is basically a matrix, and that's why they used it. So that shows very profound knowledge of the values that they were trying to plant in. It was not done as a propaganda or narrative. So I think if it's done with knowledge of the subject, then it doesn't become a propaganda anymore. Then it becomes something that you have control of. And that's true for even Western filmmakers. When Abrahamic ideologies or anything else is put in the movies, we might call it, coming from a different cultural background, we might call it propaganda, but I honestly think that that's not propaganda. They actually believe in it. They have read through it. Whatever philosophies or scriptures they have, they think them to be true, and they have thorough knowledge before they put it on screen.
That's very profound. I think it'll take me some time to analyze what you've just said, and I'll have to come back to you with questions at a later
I
date.
hope that's not your polite way of saying that it didn't make sense.
But that was part of your answer, though, right? It's different things make sense to different people. Maybe I'm just having a slow day. Maybe our listeners could send us an email to let us know what they think. And so, to everyone listening at home, podcast@vicharamanthan.org. I think we're near the end, but I've got one final question for you, Aditya Ji, and I'm not sure it's related to cinema or or any of that stuff. But the family heritage from which you come from, the Patwardhans. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because you've got quite a story, I think.
It might be not a long answer, but it might be like, it might have historical data in there. That's one subject I can speak on more than films. so,
Sure.
uh, my family comes from the south of India, originally from the western coast, which is called Konkan. So the cities of Ganpatipure, Ratnagiri. It's a coastal belt right below the Sahyadri Mountains. So it's almost like a landlocked rainforest south of Mumbai and north of Goa, between Mumbai and Goa, basically. That's where my family comes from. The community is called Chitpavan. In early 1700s, they migrated out to the mainland. Mainland would be the central Maharashtra that we call now, and naturally Marathi became our regular mother tongue. And members from my clan, my Patwardhan side of things, they were the commander in chiefs or other military posts in the Peshwa Empire, in the Maratha Empire. So through that, we had seven states in the south of Maharashtra, on the border of Maharashtra and Karnataka. So there were seven states being run by the Patwardhan family until the independence in 1947. So that's where the entire Patwardhan history comes from. And then obviously my grandmother was a doctor, and she became a doctor in Rajasthan, in Jaipur, in Jodhpur. So that's why my father was born there, and because she was a doctor, my grandfather moved to where she was. That's how my family came to be in Rajasthan, and then I grew up in Jaipur. So essentially, I'm a Rajasthani. My Hindi is very fluent compared to any other Marathi. Marathi for me was only a language I spoke in my house with my parents. So my first exposure to proper Maharashtra came at the age of 22 when I went to Pune to explore the part of my heritage. And then when I moved to LA, my roommate and my cinematographer Anup, he was a Marathi, so that he was technically my first Marathi friend. And I learned, I understood the cultural context of Marathi from him more than I had done before. Though my Marathi is fluent, but it's a very civil Marathi I speak in home. And people from Maharashtra's Marathi is different because they speak it out in the streets. There's much more slang to it. It's much more casual. So that's the Patwardhan side. But there's an interesting aspect to it. This community from the coastal belt that I call Chitpavan, they migrated to India between 1000 and 1200 AD from Black Sea region, and they were part of the groups that were trying to reopen the trade route between northern and eastern Black Sea, with the southern empires once more, because it had been shut off due to crusades and due to the Abbasid Caliphate in Iran. So when they arrived in Central Asia, there was the thing is they could not go back because there was crusades happening in Europe going towards north. So the only path this community had was to go south. And those days, India was the only safe haven where you knew you could land up and stay. So it's supposed. I mean, it's speculated that they crossed over the Chitral Valley and Dir Valley in Pakistan, took a boat down Indus, went to the Arabian Sea. The idea was to land on the southern coast of India and in the very south, but there was an immense shipwreck on the way, and their ships crashed on the Konkan coast, and that's how they ended up being there. And they adopted the local language, mixed with the local fisherman community, and it became this unique group of partly Eastern European, partly local fishing community people, and it was endogamous for a long time. So still in my family, you would have people with weird features which are not local to Western Maharashtra, or especially not local to fishing communities at all. They stand out a bit, and that story is an example of what Sanatan Dharma or Bharat was or is. Even then, when they were running from Eastern Europe, the only land they knew would be a safe haven was the south of India, or was the Indian subcontinent.
That is a beautiful story, and you really are from all over India. Or at least you can trace your story back. What was that? 1,000 years?
Would be 1,000. Like in terms of family tree, I can trace it to 1600s. So there's a gap between,
Wow.
so 1600s and 400 years before that, the actual landing in India. That's where things are a bit murky. But genetics is something that I love, so this is something I actively pursue all the time. I keep trying to look for more research and books and things that can shed a light on this.
Beautiful, beautiful stories there, Aditya Ji. And I think you should turn that into a film one day. Had the something to do with the Patwardhans and their contributions to humanity. Um, I've certainly learned a lot from you, Aditya Ji. Number one, that I should join your team out in LA. That would be interesting. But no, seriously, just about the visualization that a director has looking at a scene, at a set, the ideas and the narratives, or not even narratives, like the defaults of what a society should look like or a flourishing society could be like. And I think you play an admirable role trying to direct and portray such concepts across to influence people that watch your movies. Are there any parting thoughts? Is there something you'd like to leave our listeners with? Something to think about?
Parting thoughts would be that filmmaking is an interesting field. Anybody who wants to join definitely should, and it doesn't have to be a full-time profession. Nowadays, with phones and cameras and everything, it's something everybody can do on the side as well as full-time. So if people do want to consider it, please do. And if it's about telling dharmic stories or stories about Sanatan Dharma, um, I would recommend it's always done with a lens of analyzing the subject first, knowing that it has logical, philosophical, scientific roots. If we are telling dharmic stories, it's not narratives, it's not propaganda, it's logic.
So, Dharma Through Cinema by Aditya J. Patwardhan.
Wow, that's a title.
Thank you very much, Aditya Ji, for joining us on the podcast. For everyone at home, I hope you've enjoyed that too. And find your own way of expressing Dharma through your own cinema lens. So, Aditya Ji, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Sumit, for having me on board. It's been an honor. You are a very profound radio host. Let me say that. And not only this podcast, but I've when it comes to public speaking, I've learned a lot of things from you. Starting from World Hindu Congress, when you gave me a couple of tips of how to speak and how to conduct to an audience, and I always keep them in mind. And I hope you can be on the set someday and point out a few things I can do with there. So
That
once
would
again,
be
thank you for having me on board.
that would be an absolute privilege, and thank you for your kind words. This was the Vichar Manthan podcast. My name is Sumit Sharma, and as ever, it is my great privilege to host this project, a dharmic project looking to analyze modern day problems, issues, societies, and commentary in a civilizational dharmic way. If you have agreed with anything we've said today, if you've disagreed or have comments to share, I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you. Please do contact us on our social media handles or indeed on email. the Vichar Manthan podcast, bringing dharmic concepts to your ears. Please do tune in and namaste.